We had some people. We had some people say that the link might be have timed out. We're hoping everybody can join. Uh, Taylor, maybe you can just email the last email that came in just to make sure that they have a link for us as well. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Jenny. I always feel like I need to let everybody know they should talk amongst themselves at this point, but it's just we'll just wait a few minutes. It's 2:59. Wait till a couple minutes after 3, and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like it's slowing down here. So I'll get started. Remember, everyone, this is recorded, so we can you can find this recording on shiftchangenow.com. Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday. We'll start by acknowledging that the land that we gather on virtually today is the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Thanks for joining. My name is Gino DiDomenico, and it is my privilege and my pleasure on behalf of Talkofino and Shift Change to welcome you here today. Shift Change is committed to actively support positive and sustainable change in our industry by creating an avenue for dialogue on opportunities that exist in an effort to inspire people to take action and make meaningful change. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest speakers, Joanna Jagger. Joanna is passionate about educating future leaders and moving the dial for gender equity. She has extensive experience in the hospitality industry. She has implemented best practices in training, development, recruitment, and recruitment, talent management, leadership, workplace health, and safety and union relations. She is the president and founder of Worth Association, a society for women of recreation, tourism, and hospitality. Worth Association was incorporated in 2018 to combat inequities in the industry and provide opportunities for networking, mentorship, education, and leadership development. Representing women of worth across the province, Joanna advocates with industry associations and the provincial government to ensure a more equal future for women and in industry leadership. Thanks, Joanna, so much for being here today.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
As well, we have, it's great excitement and my pleasure to introduce Puneet Kochhar. She is not only my amazing friend, but she's the head of Talkofino. She is Talkofino's head of finance. Puneet is an expecting mother, a chartered professional accountant. She just celebrated her 5 years with us here at Talkofino and has been a key figure in our growth. Puneet is the co-founder of Van FBC, which provides free educational resources and support employees and owner and operators, as well as financial assistance to employees in need. If you want to learn more about VanFBC, please go to vanfbc.com. Puneet is also more pertinently the founder of Women of Tocofino, a committee that works together in solidarity to help bridge the gap of gender inequality in the hospitality industry by initiating conversations in a safe space with the effort to provide personal and professional growth and development for women in and out of the hospitality industry. Behind the scenes here and making this all come together is our head of people and engagement, Mr. Taylor Shabadiak, usually on the forefront, today taking a little bit of a back seat, but nonetheless still the glue that holds this shift change together and a force behind it. Thanks, Taylor. He's kind of blacked out there. As always, Tocofino makes a donation for every shift change. This shift change donation of $1,250 will go to the very worthy Worth Association, and you can visit them at worthassociation.com to learn more about the wonderful things they're doing and to donate. If you want to get any more of this information, learn about the speakers or the organizations, again, to review the video, you can go to shiftchangenow.com. I got two screens going. I don't know where I'm looking. It's like, with me on, without further ado, I've spoken enough. I will pass the mic to the lovely Puneet. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Gino. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I'm also very excited to be here today. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being part of this important dialogue on how the industry is failing women. I'm honored to be facilitating today with the powerhouse woman, Joanna, who I've gotten to know over the past couple of months. And she is truly an inspiration to me. So I'm very excited for all of you to learn more about the work that she's doing within our industry, as well as hear her thoughts on important issues, specifically relating to the challenges faced by women, both historically and present day within the recreation, tourism, and hospitality industries. So just to start off, a little bit of housekeeping. Please submit all of your questions directly to us through the Q&A button that you guys should all see at the bottom of your screen. Or you can always click the raise your hand button as well. I will be asking the audience some questions throughout the session about your personal experiences within the industry. If you feel comfortable, we would love to hear your thoughts and responses. You can share with us using the chat function. Just full disclosure, the chat function is going to be visible to everybody. So if you would like to submit a question anonymously, please use the Q&A function. But if you're okay with sharing your personal experiences, please use the chat function. Also, we're really hoping to make this session engaging and interactive. So we'll also be doing a few poll questions throughout the session. So feel free to ask questions throughout the session today. Gino is going to be moderating them, but we'll also make sure to leave some time at the end of the session to discuss. If for some reason we don't get to your questions today, you can always reach out to Joanna or I directly, and we would be more than happy to chat with all of you. So to start off, Joanna, thanks again for being here today. Maybe to start off, we'd love to hear about what inspired you to start Worth Association.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. This is such a privilege and an honor, and I love seeing some men hosting and also in the participant list, the attendees. So grateful for everyone's time. Worth was a complete accident. You know, it was not intentional. I'll just give you a bit of my story of my career in hospitality. I'm like so many people when you say, you know, I fell into this industry. And I fell in when I was 15, and I did pretty much every role outside of what you do with finance. But you know, I was a cook. I started my career that way, and then a bartender, a server, a hostess, a manager, catering, sales, and then human resources. So I had such a rich career in the industry. And then at some point, when I started to think about family planning, I looked at my kind of dream job that I had achieved, and I thought there wasn't really a place for me anymore. That I wasn't very welcome with this news of my, expecting a baby. And now that was the culture of the organization. But for me, I wanted to find some resources or people where I could talk about accelerating my leadership as a parent, as a younger woman at the time. And when I went out to look for it, I found nothing. So while I went on maternity leave, I almost kind of was looking for a different path, a different career option. And I went back to school. I studied a master's in leadership. And while studying, I started to do a lot of work related to gender. And I was looking for information about women in hospitality, women in tourism. I was having a hard time finding that too. And I was recognizing that people weren't having a dialogue about women in our industries, because as much as I would have liked to have seen. And I think part of that is this perception of it's a female dominated industry. And so I like to say flat out, it's a female dominated industry where women are not dominating. And so there's a lot of work to be done. I started uncovering this in my research. And then what I decided to do is host an event. And I thought I would just do one event together in a community talk, much you do with Shift Change. And it was amazing to see the response. I had 50 people on a wait list trying to get in the door to have this conversation about barriers women face in our industry. And I'll back up, because the reason that happened, in fact, it was a bit spiteful. Like all good things come from a little bit of spite. I had asked a manager of mine, could I gather the women in our organization to talk about women in leadership? And he said, no, we see all women the same. And, we're not gonna, don't single the women out. Everyone's the same here. And I sat with that for a while, and I was like, no, you don't see all women the same. Not when there's so many issues and we don't have visible women on our senior leadership ranks. So that spite kind of fueled this event. I was like, if you're not going to let me do it here, I'll do it publicly. And we brought hundreds of women to a venue. And then the women of Whistler called, and they said, hey, let's bring this event to Whistler. And the women of Victoria called, and let's do that here. So it just kind of snowballed. And in 2018, we incorporated and started the association. And it's been wonderful since.
Wow, that's unbelievable. It's funny how these things kind of happen by accident, and it's very interesting to hear you say how you wanted to get a group of women together within your organization to just sit down and discuss, and even that was shut down. So it makes me feel even more grateful that, I was able to start the Women of Tocofino, which is exactly that. It started off with just a roundtable discussion of us sitting and talking about issues that are specific to women and what we can do to change them. So now I think we're like moving in the right direction, where organizations like Worth are able to exist. And there's a very good reason why you had 50 people waiting to get in, because there's a lot of women in the industry, and there's a lot of them experiencing a lot of these similar challenges. So the past year has been very difficult for all of us throughout the pandemic. But along with all of the issues that we were already facing, now with COVID, we've seen that the impacts of COVID-19 have been particularly difficult on women. How would you say the pandemic has impacted women in hospitality, and how do you think we can work collectively to ensure women's workforce participation rebounds in the recovery effort?
Yeah, it's been as bad as it could ever be imagined to be. And I would say, universally, we know how difficult this pandemic has been. And we talk about the hardest hit industries where hospitality is at the forefront. But when we look at who disproportionately has been affected, it's young and racialized women. And so we're looking at this, again, that female dominated industry where 60% of our workforce are women, but often in those precarious entry-level part-time roles. And so those were the jobs that were lost. And in accommodation and food services, it was about 65% of those job losses were women. And so we still know that this is an ongoing challenge with job losses continuing. We like to look at the numbers to say, are we rebounding as quickly as we would like as restrictions open up? And I know, organizations like Tacofino have done a really good job of retaining their team, but when we looked to 2021, we had 500,000 women out of work, and so across the country, and the lowest labor force participation in 3 decades. And even as recently as April, we were down 47,000 jobs across Canada. And if we looked at kind of the industry, or all the job losses universally, we had tourism and hospitality was 95% of employment losses in April. So this is, I share that you're a numbers person, I share the numbers here, but it's what's even more significant is the female talent drain, or the exodus from the industry, the perception of women no longer seeing their place, no longer trusting job security, or maybe they've had a bit of a break from the industry and turned to a different opportunity, and it's going to be very, very difficult to get them back. We heard a lot about burnout from our membership, we heard about the demands of the industry over a long career. And so we're demanding the recovery is considered through this intersectional feminist lens, ensuring women are the forefront of the conversation about what needs to change and how do we build back better. And it's really been a catalyst for change, I think, for the industry on so many levels, but certainly on how we support women and how we offer flexibility and offer career trajectory paths and plans and support. We're going to be fighting for labor. Every industry is. It's going to be, there's shortages before the pandemic, and there's going to be significant shortages after. And we're predicting rebounds, but we won't have the people to work the jobs. And we certainly will lose a lot of that human capital, the women that were in mid to senior level roles, that maybe this pandemic shifted their priorities. So my goal is to look at ensuring women's workforce participation rebounds in the recovery effort by having conversations like this to say what needs to change, what needs to occur at the mid-management level to help women accelerate into senior leadership roles, to see the path to executive leadership, because this is where the problem is. We have a lot of women that work middle management jobs, and we have very, very few at the top. Our website shows some statistics around it, but it's like 10 times more likely for a man in our industry, our female-dominated industry, to be promoted to a senior executive level. And so we're just really challenged in this respect to say we're losing women are leaving, and they're not coming back. So what are the conditions that have to change? And it's going to take a lot of dialogue and a lot of changed employment practices to show that this is such a rich career opportunity. I look at roles like yours, and we talked about this in finance, or my background in human resources, or just different paths you can have in hospitality and tourism that are so incredible and rewarding. And, we bring a passionate bunch to this business. Now it's recognizing that we have to foster that talent and ensure that, women are considered and their voices at the table to see what the needs are. And it really does start with employee resource groups like yours, where you can have women sitting around a table and opening the dialogue and having people listen to what practices need to change.
Yeah, no, that sounds that's very on point. We're also seeing that there's been a significant labor shortage. I mean, we hear about it from other restaurants and restaurant groups as well. And you're probably right. I think women have had a chance to kind of sit back and think through their career and whether they want to continue, and something needs to change significantly for them to want to come back into the roles. And all these barriers for them to moving up to senior roles need to be removed somehow. So it's great to hear. And like you mentioned, there are other opportunities that I think sometimes aren't considered, like a role in finance. It's totally possible to continue working in an industry that you love and adore in a different capacity than, you know, on the floor at the restaurant. So, and I think I've seen on your website as well, Joanna, that you have a mentorship program. Is that something where women can sign up and be mentored on other opportunities? Like, what kind of mentors do you attract?
That's a great question. So that will be returning in the fall. We've just received a generous grant through Les Dames d'Escoffier of BC. And so we're going to be revamping our program to expand it. We had a really successful mentorship program. But here's an interesting thing. It's really easy to find what we would call the protege or the mentee. There's a lot of women looking for that leadership. Where it was a bit more challenging, interestingly enough, was to entice the mentors and to make women feel, to remind them how much they have to offer. And that's twofold. Women are very busy who work in this industry. We're all very busy, men, women, any gender identity is busy. It's a full-on shift that you're running. So one, do we have the time commitment that we can offer? Also, just am I ready to be a mentor? And that was so interesting to me to learn that women with 5, 10, 15 years experience just maybe didn't think they were quite ready to offer that. So we're going to make our program in the fall really quite interesting, with a lot of sessions with a group, with breakout rooms, some virtual, some in person, thank goodness, to get people together to learn from a bunch of different voices on a lot of different topics. You know, so sometimes I think it is about tapping women on the shoulder a little bit to say, you're ready. And that means for mentorship, that means for roles. I think about how, you've heard this before, right? That women will say, I'm only ready to do this job when I have 100% of the qualifications. And men are like, I can do this job, like, no problem. And like, I've been here 3 months. I'm ready for the keys, boss. Like, I'm ready to go. And, you know, I think of my restaurant career when even like the idea of floor walking was terrifying to me. And then I'd see some like, you know, student, young guy, I was like, I got this. And meanwhile, I'd put like 5 years into the organization. So, you know, it's not to say that maybe I had some self-limiting beliefs, but also you just need that tap on the shoulder to say, you're ready for this. And so that's what we're going to be working with women in our industry to remind them, you're ready and you've got a lot to offer. So I'm excited to get more information to your network as well about mentorship coming up.
Yeah, that'd be great. And you're absolutely right. I mean, even me, my own personal experience, I mentored with the young women in business recently, and it took me, I think they had been asking me, or somebody had been contacting me for about 5 years before I said yes. And at that point, I think I already had 10 or 11 years of accounting experience, but I still didn't feel that I had anything to give anyone. Like, what could somebody possibly learn from me? But and then you go through it and you're like, wow, like I was actually able to really help somebody else in their career and provide very like helpful advice to help them, you know, for their own career trajectory. So that's really interesting. I mean, we would love to hear more about it. So I'm sure once you have information, you'll share it with everybody, or we'll keep an eye out on your website. You also mentioned that tourism and hospitality have a much higher percentage of women in the workforce. I mean, it's no secret, but still a very small percentage of them are in leadership roles. I think you mentioned it's 10 times more likely for men to be promoted to a very senior leadership role, like a partner or president. Why do you think that there's such a lack of representation at this level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of factors involved. And what was interesting, I look at these studies, and one that stands out to me, I think about a lot, is that when asked, men and women, do you want to achieve the highest level you can in this industry? 73% of women were like, yes, you know, I want to get as far as I can in this hospitality organization. And only 63% of men said yes. So, 10% more women said, I want to go as far as I can in this organization, meaning they want promotions, they want to lead. And then they were asked why. This goes back to your point of mentorship being so important. Their motivation was to be a female role model. And so we have a population of women who want to lead. They want to be a female role model, whereas the men said, like, I just want the money and title, right? Which are natural motivators as well. But we have women that want to be role models. They want to take on these jobs. And yet we're scratching our heads to say, well, why are we not seeing the women in the roles, right? It just makes sense. Female dominated numbers. We progress women into senior leadership roles, and that makes sense. But what we do see a lot is the exodus of women when they have families, because of kind of an archaic understanding of that ideal employee, right? The always on, always available, always here. And there is a time for that employee, and maybe that's a restaurant opening or something to that effect, but that's just not realistic. And so that comes into play in a big part. There's also, again, that tap on the shoulder element. So women not having that, the career path in their sights, because if we're talking about smaller operations or smaller businesses, which most restaurant companies are, or tourism attractions, they don't actually have that succession planning, or we're not having the conversations about where they go. What we know and what we're excited about is that the idea of all this is changing a little bit. The pandemic has really given us more pause on what a flexible working arrangement looks like, how we can add more flexibility to all of our lives. And how can we use men not as just allies in this conversation, but as advocates? And I see that with the faces I see here, and just how we're having more men to champion, right? We maybe we don't need as much mentorship. We need kind of sponsorship and conversations about this idea of advocating for women. So what I mean by that is not just tapping women on the shoulder necessarily. It's declaring something like, we need more women who are cooks in this organization. We need more women behind the bar. And having that disclosure and that conversation starts to get people that are in the hiring positions to look at how they screen a little bit differently. We might have to just set the targets and measure the progress to be at a place we want to be. And this is not terrifying. This is like, just put it in a spreadsheet, right? Like just do something in your management circles to have the conversations about what do we need to do differently. And I certainly see this too about the voices we need at the table. And we know we need diverse voices at the table. We need racialized women at the table. We need Indigenous women at the table. We need to have more consideration to the challenges that are faced by women of color in our community and in our country and across the board. And so Canada's lagging on this, because as a nation, this is pre-pandemic numbers, but only about a third of companies in Canada were even tracking formal measurements towards gender equity. And if you look at Europe, you look at even parts of the States, it's 50%. 50% of large organizations are actually talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the challenge is that we've shelved a lot of these because of COVID. For good reason. We've shelved a lot of these initiatives because we've had, like, the house has been on fire. But now we have to say, all right, let's go back to those metrics and measures and talk about them and make some decisions about where are we going to go find people that we want around the table. So whether that's diversifying our recruitment, working with like Indigenous bands to let them know, hey, I have some job opportunities, or culinary schools. I would love to see more women. And that's okay to do that. It's okay to talk about wanting to add more women to your company, and not fear discriminatory retaliation. This is just a disclosure.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Sorry, Gino, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to really hop in as like a business owner and manager, you mentioned allyship versus, advocates. And I don't know who's on here right now. We're in a bit of a unique position as a business where, we have multi units. We have about 250 employees, but what are some of the small things that small to medium sized businesses, or even some of the large, the big chains can do to really go from ally to advocate just within their business? What are some, quick and easy sort of takeaways that you can do today or leave with that people can implement?
Great question. So one thing I like, organizations like Gibbons Group and Whistler brought this idea forward for me, is that they have their senior service staff take one shift a week in floor walking and supervision. And the rationale on that is that gets that person more invested in the business. It looks at succession planning, and it gives more of that, again, kind of nod to somebody to say, I want you to see your role as a leader here. And I think that alone is something that if you have a rotating team that has that training, we know that's actually helpful for the business, and that's going to be better for long-term succession. What you're doing already with your conversations, your employee resource group is wonderful. I think dialogue is so important. And I think living by your values. So if you set a value of inclusivity, you set a value, talk about it a lot and make sure you're living it. And I see so many organizations say that, or maybe it's like in the orientation, but we don't talk about our values again after that day. I'm really examining those values. And what I'll be really frank about is that if you're not going to open the door to dialogue in your business about where your women are at, or where the racialized people in your team are, they'll open an Instagram account. We've seen that now, right? The blowback locally and across the country of employees, and especially Gen Z coming in, the 15 to 24-year-olds that are coming in the workplace, they're very vocal and very demanding on what's right. And they're going to change things for us in a really good way, because they will be, they'll be putting out an Instagram account talking about your poor employee practices. And I don't want to shame any businesses, but I do think that was a lesson for everybody to start examining if their house is in order. And you won't much rather want to have that conversation and, collectively remedy any issues before it gets to the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's really very much comparable to the way that the hospitality industry works, and the way that you want to get to a guest if they had a bad time and make it right before they leave your doors, because they're going to go on Yelp, they're going Google reviews, they're going to give you a terrible review. So you want to make sure that you try to handle that before it gets out in the world. That was great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and it's there's companies out there that our industry is small in that sense, where when it is tough to find people, you want to be that employer of choice, that people have a really positive feeling, they love the culture, they feel supported, they feel trusted, they trust you, you trust them. And the word of mouth around where to work, it's very, very clear. In this town, in Vancouver, in Toronto, people know the companies that are doing it right, and they won't work for the places that they're not. And strong, smart, capable women will work at the places that they are able to be strong, smart, and capable.
It's very true. Thanks, Joanna, and thanks, Gino, for that question. So we're going to do our first audience poll. The question is, you should actually see a little dialogue pop up on your screen where you can also see the question. Do you feel that there is a lack of representation of women's leadership within your organization? So we have a few, about 30 seconds left, and then we'll wait for the responses. In the meantime, I'd like to also ask another question for the audience to share their thoughts. Outside of kind of what we've discussed, has anyone sort of witnessed or experienced other common barriers for women entering leadership roles? Please share your thoughts and comments if you feel comfortable in the chat function, in the chat section. Also, just a reminder, you can raise your hand if you'd like to add or discuss anything during this seminar. We'd be happy to make it interactive. And I also noticed that Karen had posted a very interesting comment. She said, until society at large recognizes how much unpaid work we expect from women, there will continue to be human resource strain from middle and upper level positions. Elder care, expecting single women to sit on boards, childcare, volunteering, and not to mention the unpaid labor of running a household. I thought that was very interesting. It's so true. I think society puts this huge burden on women because historically women have held certain positions within societies, within their household, and it really needs to change, because that was a time when women weren't necessarily bringing home the bread or working or have careers. And now we've come to a place where women are putting a huge importance on their career, as they should. But then a lot of these other expectations of, for example, taking care of your parents, taking care of your family, or being way more involved in your children's lives are still very prominent. And society would expect them from a woman a lot more than they would from a man. So thanks for sharing that, Karen. I thought that was really, really insightful.
Definitely. Now, we know that women are spending 1.5 hours a day more than men on unpaid work in the province of BC. And so that alone, if you imagine an hour and a half of your day that you're doing more of those household chores, and I'm coming from a woman with a 3- and 6-year-old, I can certainly relate.
Yeah. So we have the poll results here. So 57% of participants said yes, they do feel that there's a lack of representation, and 43% actually said no. Joanna, do you think is it surprising to you at all, these results?
No, you know what, that's great. And I wonder, with if the respondents to that, if they have positions in marketing, human resources, there's a possibility that the representation of women is a lot higher, which is great. In some other, maybe it's accommodations management, culinary, we'd have less women in leadership, which goes to, one thing we know is there's this, like, to Karen's point, we have this women as in servitude, right? So a lot of the roles that we see in hospitality are an extension of what we feel the female should be doing. So the service side, that the people side, maybe a little bit more of that softness to elements of the jobs, as opposed to saying, the chef must be a man, which is ironic, because if you ask any chef, where did you get your passion for cooking? They say my mother or my grandmother. And yet there's this really huge barrier to have women as head chefs. And so I've never really understood that. And I'm digging into it more. But, so we do see the occupational gender segregation, which exists. I'm excited when I see numbers like that, though, when women or respondents are able to say, I have women in leadership here. That to me is wonderful. And it's really just a scan of the room. If you scan your room, you scan the boardroom if it's a large organization, or the floor if it's a small restaurant, and you can see a equal representation, you're on the right path. It's where organizations, or you go into a restaurant, you can feel it. You walk in and you see like a bunch of guys in ties running the floor, and you have some young girls kind of behind the hostess stand. That's where I have challenges, and I think we all do, because our eyes are open to maybe some inequities along that leadership path.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Being first generation Canadian, in my household, I always remember seeing my mom and dad in very gender specific roles too. Not to say that my mom didn't have a career for herself. She had an amazing career and is an entrepreneur as well. But on top of all of that, because she comes from an Indian background, the expectation was for her, well, if you want to work, that's great, go ahead and work. But you have to also do all these other things like run the household, make sure there's 3 hot cooked meals every single day, raise the kids, et cetera, et cetera. The list just goes on. So I think that is kind of changing nowadays. And it's quite promising to see that, I mean, 57% no is not ideal, but I mean, it's still kind of moving toward a trend of us moving closer or closing the gap a little bit more. So, I mean, and you also kind of mentioned hostesses and how young women are in that role. So I feel like there can be very gendered job segregation within the hospitality industry, with some establishments keeping women out of certain roles. For example, hostess for women versus busboy for busboys or all male kitchens. What do you think is the impact of these types of hiring decisions on the industry?
Right. Yeah, it's like so there's 2 ways. It's segregation, right, of occupational segregation. So we have a horizontal line of occupational segregation, like busboys, and then the hostesses. So that's already biased language we're using. And then we have vertical segregation. So I mentioned that, you know, we have on the leadership journey, we have maybe a lot of women in marketing or a lot of women in HR. But then we'd say, okay, so who from the vertical line gets moved into those senior roles? And we might take somebody more like from operations, let's say, and move them up, as opposed to considering the talents from where there's kind of a big group of population of women. So yeah, I mean, this is again back to kind of the feminization of sometimes the hospitality side of things, where we have dress codes that are super specific. We have women that are put into roles like hostess is a really good example. I worked in lots of restaurants where it was like a hostess stand. You go to the hostess stand. We didn't call them hosts or greeters or anything. It's all biased. And so this is again where that declaration happens, a pledge to say we've got to balance this out a bit more. I remember in hotels, I hired a gentleman to work with the housekeeping team. And it was, everyone lost their minds. They were like, in 40 years, we have never had a man as a housekeeper. And I thought, well, what is happening here? Whereas in hotels, you have people who clean the rooms, and then you have a role called house person. We just said houseman. And when you looked at the wages, they were similar, but when you looked at the efforts extended between the individuals that cleaned the rooms, the room attendants versus the house person would do deliveries of towels, or, you know, and there was this understanding that as this man was hired, he belonged with housemen and he could not, you know, work. And that stayed with me forever. And I also remember when I was HR for a company of restaurants, I was sat down by the CEO. And so I represented a number of restaurants, and we were so excited about this new direction. And the new direction was new menus, it was new decor, new design. And we really wanted to attract young people to our restaurants. And my boss looked at me and said, you know what that means? That means we need to have pretty young girls working at this restaurant. And this is somebody I respected enormously. And I just said, are you joking? Like, are you kidding? That's not how we attract people to the restaurants. And so I had an active role as a hiring manager to make decisions. I had an active role in who I looked at, what resumes came through, looking at my own biases, putting out training on bias, having training on diversity for the team, so we could have conversations about, hey, are we like doing what our parents did, or you know, our parents' parents, or these old school restaurateurs, old school hoteliers, or are we looking at the representation of society and seeing that on our schedule, right? Are we seeing that everywhere? So, you know, I really think the biased language, and I think it's just that question for yourself. If you look at your team and you start to have that question, like, are we doing this right? You're going to know. You have a gut check about where are the inequities, and what are we saying to our team with that? And best people I've worked with are those who've worked in every role, right? It's like you have to get that experience hauling kegs. There's a restaurant group in town that when young women apply, they'll say, I'm sorry, we are not going to accept your resume because we don't take women behind the bar here. Like you can't even imagine how we're starting that conversation with like the bad taste in our mouth and discriminating against your applicant. Like usually the discrimination happens in the interview at least, or the hiring, but like you're just putting that out there. So, and I thought about that a lot, where I thought, why wouldn't you see the advantages of balancing your teams a little bit better, where you get somebody that has that experience as a greeter, as a busser, you know, as progressing through the restaurant or the organization to get that varied skill set. That is your next GM.
Right. No, that's so great. I mean, yeah, the experience that you get in these positions that maybe aren't progressing is probably invaluable. And I also am a strong believer that I think diversity, or having people that are not sort of, you don't expect them to be in that role, probably brings so much more to the table than you would think. So, I mean, it's shocking to even hear that that kind of discrimination took place not so long ago, where blatantly in applications, you're being told that, well, women aren't welcome for this specific position. It's just unbelievable. But I mean, so to also another barrier that I think another challenge that women face that we see a lot, or is pertinent in hospitality, is sexual harassment. So whether that's advances or abuse within the industry, what are your thoughts on sort of changing this kind of toxic work environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think where that brings tipping into the conversation a little bit. And the reason that I bring that up is we know that tipped workers, a survey came out where 71% of tipped workers have faced harassment. And so I'd be curious, okay, so when you think about harassment in the industry, where do you think the harassment's coming from? 71% of tipped workers say they're getting it. Do you think it's from the customers, the colleague, or the manager? What do you think now?
I would love to say only the customers, but just having worked so deeply, and it's coming from everywhere, it's pretty blatant. But I want to know what the actual answer is.
It's about equal. So it's about equal numbers of customers, equal to colleagues and peers, and equal to management. So this is hundreds or thousands of people were surveyed for this. And so I dug into that data, and I was shocked too, because even having lived through all the harassment, I was thinking that I've been obviously fortunate that I didn't see that from management, certainly from colleagues and peers. But that's where we have a huge problem. So we have more harassment internally than externally, if you add up the numbers. And so this is toxic. And when you look at any other industry, like women in construction are not getting harassed as much as the women that work in restaurants and attractions. Like, we're so bad. We have a terrible reputation for it. And what I'm so vocal about is that when we sit there and we say, well, two things are really troubling. How many people think that sexual harassment isn't a problem in their workplace? It's like 94%. People are totally blind to this or acting like this isn't a problem at all. And what is even more challenging for me is that when women speak up about harassment, from this study I referenced, it was something like 98% felt or experienced retaliation from their peers, from their management, from their schedule changed, their section changed, whatever it might have been. They were not listened to, they were not supported. And so we have to look in the mirror and say, what the hell are we doing if we are going to permit a culture that is so toxic and so dangerous to women? What I'm grateful to hear, though, is that women are reporting at larger numbers to their managers. But what needs to be understood is that a lot of women won't. And a lot of women won't say anything, and they will leave your organization with having never said anything. So that means the perpetrators get to continue on. I've seen it with my own eyes where men in the industry will almost groom or target young women that are coming in. Maybe it's their first job, their second job in the industry. They're just out of school. like it's so troubling to hear the language that's used and the comments and the jokes. And so as leaders and as managers, it is imperative that we take an active stance in having zero tolerance for any form of harassment. And that's, again, that doesn't live in a handbook, that doesn't get put on a shelf somewhere, that is actioned, and that anybody who claims as a harassment claim has a full right to an investigation. And that as leaders, we're not sweeping under the rug. We're going to have to make some hard decisions, well, not hard decisions, but decisions about who stays with our organization and who goes. And so, you know, again, a dialogue about this, if you open that up, that conversation with your team to say, hey, who has experienced this? And let's talk about it. And that's as far as saying, we're going to evict our guests or blacklist our patrons. We're not going to accept their behaviors in our establishment so that the people here feel safe. So gone are the days of the customer's always right, because that's the way we were conditioned. And that's this idea of servitude. And women have certainly been conditioned to be polite and kind, and in a tipped environment, our worth and our value is based on what we put up with, our smiles. There's stories about men right now asking women to take their masks off because their tip will be based on their appearance. So, and this is happening after the years of all this discussion in the media about women and sexual harassment, and it's persistent. So it does take the leadership of an establishment to open the door to that conversation. And, I don't want to abolish tipping. That's not my belief, because I think that puts a lot of money in the hands of ownership, where then there's conversations about, who's getting what money or all these things. But I do think we have to revisit the conversation about what we permit and what we allow for that tip. And I don't think it needs to be, I don't think women need to put up with it. And I certainly have been on, I know in my server days, I certainly learned quickly how to shut down behaviors I wouldn't tolerate. And when I had to tell a manager, this person needs to go, you need to walk them out the door. And that was a lot for me to do in my early 20s, to have that dialogue and conversation, of that kind of courage to speak up and say, I am not comfortable.
I've firsthand seen, what zero tolerance policies do, and they do work. Not only do the individuals that who see a swift hand feel supported, but they tell their friends, and it just builds a culture of trust and support, and it's real team building that is so tangible and builds such a great culture. As well, for those who are listening and don't do this, one way to combat sort of the tipping sexual harassment issue is tip pools. And that means that, people are working together as a team versus, having to, flirt or whatever it may be to try to get a bigger tip, where that sort of behavior is encouraged. The great points. I do have a couple questions here. Can I ask them from the audience?
Yeah, sure.
I know that you have, some may come off as anonymous. I won't be saying any names, just to keep people anonymous, unless you put in the question that it's okay to say your name. But the first question is, how can women effectively advocate for themselves to men in higher positions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so I used to come from a place, when I started Worth, I was really big on telling women what they need to do, right? So women need to advocate for themselves. You need to ask for more money. You need to do this or that. And where I'll start is that my perception has changed a lot. And it's now more on, we don't need to fix the women. We need to fix the culture and the organization and the practices. That doesn't answer your question, I know, but I do want us to have a hard look at ourselves and say, are we always putting this on ourselves to I've lean in behind me here. That was my Bible book about, I need to lean in and I need to do more and I need to be more aggressive and assertive and this and that. And so what I would just have a hard conversation with yourself to say, is this the right environment for me to see my career flourish and for me to be my authentic self? And if the question is, how do I advocate with the men on my team to advance my career? And that's coming maybe from a place of like hesitation. I might have the question of, first and foremost, like, is this the right environment? And if it is, and if you feel the path, I think what you want to ask for is for feedback. So what we know is that women don't, for some reason, women don't get as much performance appraisal review feedback as men. And when they do get reviews, whether they're semi-annual, annual reviews, they're not always as direct. And so, or the feedback is not necessarily on objectives or metrics or anything else, or about the business. So we have to be okay and comfortable to ask for feedback and to say, hey, I really want to be here in 3 years, or I want to take this role on next year. What do I need to do and to develop? And put somebody into the position where they're able to give you that open feedback. You're there to receive it, and you understand what tangible measures, whether it's a development plan or something to that effect. And I think so few of us initiate that conversation. We just wait. We're just like, okay, maybe I'll get a review, or maybe I'll get that promotion when it comes around. And having worked in HR as many years as I have, I know that it's the people that put their hand up and say, I want to go here. How do I get there? And they bring you along on that. They're much more likely. People want to help people, meet their goals. So I think that's part of the solution. And then I also think that stretch assignments, and maybe you work for a company where you can go and be at a different location, or you can get some, throw yourself in and get that experience is always really helpful. And again, that's scary sometimes to ask for that opportunity, but doing it is going to benefit your career in the long run.
Thanks for that. I don't want to stray too far. I will get to the second question, but I know we were talking about sexual harassment. We got a few more questions as well as a poll to ask, and I will come back to the next question in just a moment. I'll give it back to you, Puneet.
Sure, no problem, thanks. So the next poll that we have for the audience is on sexual harassment. The question is sexual harassment an issue in your current workplace? So if you could answer that, that'd be great. And then in the meantime, I'd also like the audience, if they'd like to share some of their thoughts on if they're aware of anything that their company or somewhere that they've worked in the past has done really well to help create a workplace that they feel is safe and where sexual harassment is not tolerated. We'd love to hear what was done. So I think we're almost done. There's about 20 seconds left on the poll, and then we'll continue.
Can everybody see the poll results as they're coming in? Just curious. All right.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
that's very encouraging.
Well, that's what I was going to do. That I was like, can everyone see this? Did they read it wrong? Because I feel that.
That's really good.
That's wonderful to see.
That makes me feel, we're moving in the right direction. I think the Me Too movement and what we've seen locally here at some of our hotels and restaurants and the stories has really put leaders and managers into the clear understanding of, like you say, the no tolerance policies, clear investigations, training on how to conduct these investigations. I really think that was a call to action for the industry. And I think what like you say, if you model it, if you show the line in the sand, people will fall in order pretty quick, right? In terms of what they know the expectations are. So good stuff, men and women.
Yeah,
That's great.
No, that's great. So continuing on this sort of topic of barriers to entry for women, or the barriers for growth for women within the industry, a significant barrier is the bias of the maternal wall for working mothers or those starting families. What are some of the challenges that parents face within our industry, and what are some ways that we can overcome them?
Oh gosh, yeah. So, when I announced my pregnancy at my organization, which for me was a very happy time, the response immediately became, "You don't need to be part of this meeting. You're not going to be involved next year. You're going to be," the quote I quote was, "You'll be on the couch eating bonbons and watching Oprah," which, like, she had been off the air for years. But it was so dismissive of this time of my life and my contributions at a senior. I was an executive in a hotel, and it was immediate, this kind of dismissal of kind of my contributions. And for me, that was really messed up in a lot of ways. But what my belief is that when women start to plan their families for retention, you want to be a part of that conversation with them, that they're not hiding their pregnancies, that they're working with you to say, "Hey, I'm going to go off this year. I think my mat leave is going to be 12 months, maybe 18. And then I might have another baby in 2 to 3 years. How can we continue on this development so I can go where I'm going to go when I come back?" Like, that conversation never happens. And again, we're afraid to initiate it from an employer perspective because we don't want to look like we're violating human rights. But how better would I feel as a parent, as a mother, going off on leave, knowing that my employer is excited to see me back? I'm part of the organization. I get brought in for coffee sometimes. I get newsletters. I get updates on what's going on while I'm off. Why we can't get our heads around that, I don't understand. And I think we're doing this dance as women to, diminish what is a very happy time in a protectionist way. And we're just worried, and we spend a year maybe worried about the what ifs. Now, that's not for everybody, and I know that's not your case, but it's just, for me, opening that dialogue and being more comfortable. And that's where, again, where the culture is really secure and sound and thriving, you can have those conversations. The hospitality industry has a tough time with parents, because I would, in the feminist circles of which I belong, we talk a lot about childcare, and childcare being such an important element to women's participation in the workforce. Childcare gets very complicated for industry workers, right? My daycare today is going to close at 5 o'clock. I don't think they're going to run a shift if I needed to be on the floor until midnight. So what employers need to do is get a little bit more creative and more flexible with those individuals to say, how can I work with you and your schedule? I had this fantastic prep chef at a hotel I worked at. She's amazing. And she couldn't work the hours that were expected of her when she became a parent. And the one response was like, "Well, that's too bad. We're gonna have to let her go." And I thought, are you out of your mind? This is a talented person who's been here since opening of this hotel. Can we please work to find something, whether we let her, she doesn't have to do the 10-hour day, and we work together with flexibility, or we find her a different role within the organization. And that's what we did. So, I think that mothers need to be a part of the conversation and not feel like everything's like, I made that mistake, right? I said, I don't see a place for myself in this industry after kids. And I started to look elsewhere. And now I'm an educator with Capilano University and the School of Tourism. But I don't know, had I been in a different hotel environment, if that would have been the same path. I think had I been supported and had I been encouraged and connected to the organization, I think I'd still be there, or I'd still continue my path. So I'm really passionate about this because I think we're getting it wrong. And then what I would say to moms too, and people going off on leave, is that is your time, and that's your life decision. That's your baby, and whatever works for your family is what's going to work for your family. So nobody can make you, no one can take that away from you. That celebration and wonderful part of your whole life. But we have to move away from that idea of always on. and it just is not going to work. And so, you know, we have this idea of that women are supposed to, you know, work like they don't have children and raise children as if they don't work, but these are impossible standards we're setting for women. And after COVID, we can see that, you know, we've put women into an impossible situation where they've carried the burden of childcare and COVID, and been made economically vulnerable by virtue of losing all these jobs, the part-time precarious works. I just think we have to shift that a little bit to say, what are the hours you can work? How do I fit you into it? And I know that sounds like an easy fix, or I'm simplifying it, but why can't you have a part-time person that does the lunch shift and doesn't have to do the double? You know, why can't you have a prep cook that goes home at 3? Like, when we're desperate for labor, we have to start making some concessions.
No, I think that's great, and that's great advice for the restaurant groups in the industry to help support more positions or more roles like this, because I think a lot of women do start to think after they've started a family that, okay, like you, similar to you, where this industry isn't for me because I can't pull the shift. I got to pick up my kid from daycare. Something might happen. I might get a call because they're sick in the middle of the day. There's a lot of things that can happen. And I think in the past, we've seen that the industry, especially for hourly workers, is less flexible than, a 9-to-5 office job. So, I mean, I think that's something that needs to change, or, the conversation needs to be had when somebody is going on leave, to say, hey, just so you know, like, we're excited to have you back, and, we're going to try to be flexible. So they already know ahead of time that there's going to be a job available for them, and they're not going to be discriminated against, or, so they don't look for another career path while they're off, because they do have 12 months to think about it while they're on leave. Yeah. So, and then the other thing is, there's also other jobs within the industry. Like, you chose a career in HR. I mean, I work in finance. I still get to enjoy the benefits of working in hospitality and all of the joys and wonderful things that come with that. So there are other careers that you can pursue. Do you think there's anything in addition to just having the dialogue that we can do within our industry? Because I know, for example, at a lot of organizations where you go into the office, they'll have some sort of benefits for parents, or whether it's a mat leave policy or a parental leave policy. Do you see within our industry, is that the standard or the norm at all?
Oh, no, I don't see it as a norm at all. Yeah, I think we're really backwards on childcare policies and leave. Our government is very good, pretty good. The challenge, though, too, is if you think about the women who are taking the leave, we're now offered an 18-month leave. That's very good from a government angle. That's maybe not so good from a career perspective. 18 months, and I'm so torn on this because I love it for mothers, and I'm torn on it to say 18 months away from an organization, a lot can change and shift. I don't see a lot of organizations doing like top up or support throughout the leave. But what I do think is really positive, and this is, I might get in trouble from some of the moms out there, is keeping connected. Like, truly, just keeping somebody connected to say, I'm going to send you emails with some updates from time to time. I'm going to bring you in for coffee. I'm going to take you to lunch, because I want to keep you connected to what's going on. And when you're off for 12 months or 18 months, I did a master's on mat leave. I was so squirrely in my own head about just needing a bit of adult distraction. So, I can't speak for all moms, but certainly we're way behind on that. And again, we don't have employers finding us childcare or in-house daycares or anything like that. So if there's organizations that have those available, or a job security is really clear, that's going to lure moms away. And I do think we have a real challenge with this expiry date of our careers in the industry, right? We're men and women, people have this perception, and it's become more negative through COVID, of the career paths in the industry aren't there. I don't have security. I don't see my path. This is the job I do while I'm in school. So we have to combat that. And we need more role models. We need more moms out there to show how it can be done. And some of the most talented women I've ever met in this industry, the general managers and head chefs, have done it. They've done it well.
No, that's great advice. Something that I've kind of noticed, I feel like organizations maybe sometimes don't consider this, but, as somebody that's in a finance role, I think sometimes the employer might be turned off by putting a plan in place or a policy in place where they do a top up, because, if I started a 9-to-5 job, why don't I just leave, get this job, and then get pregnant, right? Rather than staying in an industry where it's not common to have these policies. But from a finance point of view, the cost to the employer actually isn't that much, because all you're paying for is a portion of, let's say your policy is to top them up to 75% of their salary for a certain amount of time. The cost to you is going to be the difference between 75% of their salary and whatever the government is giving them on a weekly basis, right? Yeah. So that amount, which you also get a tax deduction on, ends up becoming quite minimal. So I would encourage, restaurants or anyone in the hospitality, tourism, or recreational industry to seriously consider or look into some sort of policies and plans that we can put in place to make sure that we don't have this amazing general manager that's going to have a child and want to look for a job elsewhere where they're going to have better benefits, where we can encourage them to stay and make sure that they're aware, hey, we're going to support you throughout your mat leave, and then we're going to support you when you come back, with this dialogue and with the flexibility in your schedule, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's maybe something that sometimes gets missed, where people just think, oh, no, we just can't afford that. It's too much for us.
Yeah. And I mean, I think of this often too, with the idea of, you bring it up, it's your parenting is a second job. It's the most important job. And what we have a bad rap of is this always on, be there 24/7. The best employee is one that can pick up every shift and be there 24 hours a day. Well, what does that say about your organization and the culture within, that you don't have a number two that can step in, or you don't have somebody that can kind of like run the floor? People in our industry don't go on vacations because they don't trust that things are going to go well while they're away. And so we have a leadership crisis within these organizations because we're not working on developing others. So that's the women, that's the men, that's the young people, that's the new Canadians, all across the board. We are not saying, hey, I am going to invest in you and your abilities and your path. And really, if we put that investment, you're meant to do about 1% of their of a salary into professional development, we're going to be better off. And then the senior leaders can take a coffee break or just not feel like that unbelievable pressure and guilt and the buzzing of the phone at 2 a.m. or whatever you guys deal with on the regular, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So we have a question. There's been some great comments, if everyone's been able to read them, that I highly encourage you to go through when you have some time. Gino, I don't know if you want to take some time to go through a question now, but we have one that was posted in the comment section that, Joanna, maybe you can answer here quickly. So Lydia is asking that, Joanna, you said that you learned how to shut down behaviors you don't tolerate, such as harassment in the workplace, and that you developed a dialogue you can confidently vocalize. What would be your tips to women who struggle to diffuse uncomfortable situations generated by harassment?
Oh, thanks, Lydia. I probably was overselling myself where I was so confident that the heart is pounding, face is bright red, sweaty, like you're terrified to have these conversations. You start your encounter with the customer with this, like, customer's always right, I'm here to serve, I'm ready for my next table, whatever. And then things go south. And I think what empowered me to do that was leadership who started modeling it. I'll never forget the first time I saw this general manager like evict, we say evict in hotels, I guess, but like eject a table in the middle of service, and confrontational, all these things. And I thought, if he's going to do that, I need to learn to do that in a way that I can stand up for myself here. So I remember it wasn't regularly, but the few incidents I would have, I would talk to the table as if they were toddlers. And I would say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? and, you know, to make them almost uncomfortable to have to say it again. The new technique is saying, I don't get the joke, you know, making them explain jokes to you, even though you're very aware. Almost embarrassing that person with the company that they're with, so that hopefully on first strike, the people that we're with are saying, you know, cool it. At the second gesture, what we advise, of course, is to bring somebody with you to the table to observe it. So that's maybe a shift supervisor or a manager. Introduce them and say, hi, this is my sommelier, and they're going to be assisting me. And so, you know, we're flagging it. And then strike three is just to say, all right, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, or I'm going to ask you to settle your bill. And sometimes it's a cost the restaurant's going to take, just like a dine and dash or anything else. Just cut it loose and send them on their way. So I don't have perfect strategies, but I do encourage people that, again, that it's going to take a lot of courage in those situations to unravel what we have always been told to do, which is play nice, to be sweet, to be kind, to take care of our guests. You have to put that standard. And truly, every time that would happen, when you ended your shift, you know, you're talking to your colleagues, there was just such a raw, good for you, we did it, that's amazing, that encouraged that culture of we've got each other's backs here. I think of AOC, who's like my idol. She always tells the stories of like working in bars and throwing people out of the bars. And you're going to see that all the way up your career, wherever you go. You know, you have to use your voice as much as it shakes and as much as it wavers. You have to find that voice to stand up for what is right, especially when you're being made to feel small. And there's so much of that in our industry, that we are making others feel small. We're making ourselves feel small. And when that happens, the gut check has to be, I'm not going to put up with this. Right. And I joke with people, and there's a great book called Feminist Fight Club. And they say, carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man. And so I just love that, because I conjure up, like, what would a mediocre white man do right now? He wouldn't put up with this. And so that's what we all have to carry ourselves with, that confidence.
I love it.
I feel attacked.
You're no mediocre white man. No, but you know, it's really, it's like that belief in yourself, right? And belief in that assurance of standing on your own 2 feet. And it took me a lot of years to do that. I don't think in my early serving jobs I could do that at all.
That's great. That was really empowering, Joanna. I'm sure that's super helpful to you, Lydia. Joining us here from the UK, which is amazing.
Yeah, awesome.
So, Joanna, we'd love to hear what we can expect from Worth Association in the coming months. Maybe you can give us some insight on what we can expect.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we're so excited. We have this awesome dream team of volunteers, a fantastic board of directors. I see one on the call here. You know, I think for us, we're really excited to get back, a few on the call. We're excited to get back into person events. Like the live events for us, were really empowering. We have an event called Empower Her that brings together all kinds of fantastic voices, you know, front and center, and a real celebration of women in this industry. We also have an event called Yes Chef, which is 5 powerhouse female chefs that are partnered with apprentices, young women in culinary school, and they create a 5-course dinner, and we have wonderful women sommeliers do the wine pairings. And again, I think the media attention at times is just focused on the same men who run kitchens, and we want to see more women in those roles. I'm also really considering how, again, we used to be all about elevate, educate, empower, right? So we wanted to get people excited about leadership. And now my focus is more on retention, and it's more on sharing the benefits of staying with this industry and being part of the solutions to find opportunities for the industry to shift, just like you guys are doing. You know, we have to have these conversations, this dialogue, to have a fighting chance. And so I want to make sure that we're looking again at the organizations, we're looking at the government, we're looking at the tourism task forces, and having conversations about, a good example is pay equity. Like, we should actually have our positions, when we advertise them, we should show the pay band. We're one of the few provinces that doesn't have that, and we have one of the worst records for a pay gap. Well, okay, so let's fix that and let's get legislation in place so that lobbying and that advocacy for me is going to be at the forefront. And then also developing programs so that we can go into organizations and work with women, and to have the conversations, not to exclude anybody, but just to have conversations with men and women about barriers that exist, and how we can work together to create stronger cultures, to have more women in leadership roles, and balance things in organizations. So excited about the year to come. It's getting through the pandemic, like any nonprofit, was challenging, but we're really inspired by the women that we've been connecting with. Puneet, we had you as one of our, we interviewed you for our newsletter, and it's really profiling the women that are sticking with it and have a great career, to show us and to role model what can happen when you devote your career to an industry like ours. I'm a big believer in it. I'm a big supporter, and I'm excited to just see more women advocate for themselves and for us to advocate on behalf of women.
That's great. I'm super excited for all the work that you're doing. And I've attended some of your virtual events throughout the pandemic, but I'm super excited for the in-person ones. They can't come soon enough. So that's really great. Just to close off here, what advice would you give to young women entering the hospitality industry so that, they don't face some of the same challenges as we did? Anything that you could offer?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would encourage women to stick with it. I would encourage women to recognize the opportunities within. For me, what is so important for us to kind of get right is just to even out the playing field a bit, so that women have less barriers in their way and more opportunity within. So I'd like to see women advocate for themselves, like I said, but I also want to see the organizations shift to see why they need women in these roles. I think there's a lot that we can do to shift it, and a lot that we can do to change it. And I really don't want us to put it all, on the women and all, it's negotiate your salary or all these other things. We want to see, again, that gender gap close. And if we are a female-dominated industry, we need to be dominating a little bit more. And so I just say just to get out of your own way a little bit, but also when you see something that's not right, to vocalize it and find a place where the culture allows you to be your authentic self. Women have such phenomenal leadership skills in authenticity, collaboration, connection, development, mentorship. The leadership styles that women bring to the table is exactly what this industry needs right now. So I'm really excited to go to more organizations where I see women on top.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you. Gino, do we have some questions that have come in? For those of you that haven't had a chance to ask your question, the time would be now. I think we have about 9 minutes left, so we'll get to what we can here.
I do have a not question, but because it was put in the Q&A, I just want to make sure that it's heard. A brewery that I work at doesn't tolerate any mistreatment of its front of house staff. Especially females, are encouraged to ask customers to leave and refuse service if we feel uncomfortable. Ownership always backs us up and says they don't want that type of customer support base. As an owner and a manager, and having worked in the industry for a very long time, I wanted to say that out loud. Just tell everyone about that type of behavior. I think that there's still some managers that are living a little bit in the dark age, and they don't think that that's appreciated. So thanks for sharing that. And if you do come across, just tell everyone that's the right behavior. That's what management should be doing. That's what owners should be doing. And I'm happy to hear you should celebrate whichever brewery you're from, so we all go and support them. The question I skipped over was, what advice or resources would you have for women who have reached management roles but are still treated differently than the other managers at the same level within an organization?
Oh, thanks for that question. And just to go back to the brewery team member, breweries are having a moment right now, and that's a lot of advocacy internally. You can read in the Georgia Straight this week about how breweries are facing kind of this pivotal point where women are coming forward with their stories, and it's so inspiring to see the movement. So I'm glad you work for one where no BS is tolerated. And to the question about women who've reached management roles, yeah, so that's where I go back to say, is this the right place for you? You are going to have a lot of options in terms of where you can work and where you want to work coming up. And so don't be stuck somewhere where you feel you're treated differently because you're a woman. That's unfortunate. Another thing you might do is what I am inspired by for the organizations like Tacofino, who are saying, I'm going to develop an employee resource group, a conversation for women leaders, or a diversity group, which is so important right now, or even all gendered leadership conversation, to have some kind of open discussions about management and leadership within your organization. And I would love to know what would happen if you started to have dialogue at the level that you create, if those in leadership roles around you would take notice. We know that open discussions about women's empowerment and gender equality, gender equal policies are a good business practice, right? The returns are there financially for your organization if you invest in these. And I say invest, you don't even have to invest. If you just have an open forum and policies that reflect that you have integrity and values within your organization. So that's one piece of advice. But like I said, life is too short. And if you don't feel empowered and accepted, you have a lot of talents to bring to an organization elsewhere. So maybe start to shift the culture yourself. Otherwise, there's lots of people. Maybe there's an opportunity at Tacofino.
I was going to say that, but I don't want to toot my own horn. But on that note, especially in larger businesses, is companies start to get bigger and bigger. That doesn't necessarily mean all the management are totally aligned with your values or will act in accordance to what you're trying to do. So in specific situations, if you are in a leadership or management role, and that upper management might be a little bit more chummy, for example, with your male counterpart, I think that you can reach out to the person above and just say, hey, I'm not being treated equally, because it happens in as organizations get bigger. I think that that loses you can lose a little bit of touch with the managers at the restaurant levels. So yeah, just my 2 cents for what it's worth.
Awesome. Gina, do we have time for any more questions, or is that, I think we're at 4 minutes left. You're just on mute, sorry.
It's only a year now. I'm still doing it. No, I don't think that there's any more questions coming in from the audience. So I'll just put it out there one more time to ask that if anybody wants to put another question. Okay, well, I'm going to move to then close here. I think that is it. Yeah, Neat.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. Joanna, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. You've given us a lot of insightful thoughts and information that I'm sure everybody's gonna everyone's taken away from this. So we're looking forward to all the work that you and the team at Worth are doing and all of your upcoming events. Just for everyone else to know, we'll be sending out an email to all the attendees and everybody that was registered for this event with a recording of this session, along with links on where you could find more information both on Shift Change as well as Worth. You can also visit our website, shiftchangenow.com, for this recording as well as past recordings. And that's everything. Thank you.
I think that's everything. Taylor, maybe you can put your camera on really quick so everyone can say a quick hello and goodbye to you. Been there in the background. Joanna, such a pleasure. Thank you, Puneet. This has been wonderful. What a great conversation we had. So,
Thank you all for the opportunity. What a blast.
Yeah.
Keep up the great work, you guys. Really appreciate it.
thanks, you as well. Have a great rest of it. Take care.